us two ways to do that. The first they had written down is Congress can come together and propose amendments that the states have to ratify. In our case now, 38 states have to ratify the amendments. But the debate was interesting at the time because they kind of just knocked themselves up against the head after they did that. And one of them stood up and said, I keep forgetting the name. Who's here with the convention states?
George Mason.
George Mason. George Mason. If it was Sam Adams, I'd remember that, but the George Mason. But George Mason said something like, should we be so naive as to believe that a government that becomes so big and tyrannical will ever restrain itself? Will it ever propose amendments to restrain itself? They didn't even have to debate that. They added immediately that state legislatures can call for an amendments convention to propose amendments, not to rewrite the Constitution, but to propose amendments just like the Congress can. So the Congress can propose amendments, state legislatures can call a convention to propose amendments. And folks, they envision such a day as this, where our government would be so much out of control that there is no way that they will rein in their power. Yeah, I went to Washington believing we could change, and I think we did make some changes. We've slowed the growth in some cases, got rid of earmarks. I think we've stopped big things like amnesty and focused on securing our borders, which we still haven't done, but we're doing better. And I'm going to continue to work to get the tax rates down, to support conservatives there, to keep electing good conservatives. But all the time I know that Congress is no longer capable of stopping the spending. They're no longer capable of balancing the budget. There are no two people who worked harder to cut spending for fiscal responsibility to balance the budget than I have and Tom Coburn, who's in the Senate. We're now both working together on Article 5 Convention of the States, encouraging states to come together to propose an amendments convention around three subject matter areas. The first one is amendments to restrain the federal government fiscally. And that would involve more than just a balanced budget. It would be tax limitations. It would also be following general accounting principles because they're cheating all over the place now. A lot of the debt's not even on the budget. So you have no idea how much debt we're really in. The second subject is just to restrain the authority and jurisdiction of the federal government, the way it was originally intended. The 10th Amendment, the Commerce Clause, all of these things were to restrict what the federal government could do. But that's all been changed by the courts over many years. And folks, if you think the Congress is not following the Constitution now, you're actually wrong. They are following a 2,700-page annotated Constitution now that is a precedent after precedent that they follow. The Commerce Clause has been redefined to include they can control education, they control health care, they can tell you have to buy a health care product. There is no area of our lives that Congress can now not legitimately and constitutionally be involved with. But they don't follow that little pocket constitution that our founders gave us. And that's basically what we're trying to do, is go back to clarify the original intent of the Constitution, particularly the 10th Amendment. So the second subject matter is just to limit what the federal government can do, such as unfunded mandates on the states, or things like running our schools, or defining health care and taking the regulation of health care away from the states, which is what they've effectively done. The third area, the subject matter, is to propose amendments to limit the terms of federal officials, including bureaucrats, judges, congressmen, and senators. I find that last one, the term limits, gets standing O's everywhere I go, except with state legislators. And with congressmen and senators. But folks, I've heard the criticism, we really can't allow state legislators to have a convention to propose amendments because it could be a runaway. And these legislatures could come back with crazy amendments to take away our freedom of speech and our Second Amendment rights. You know, I've studied the Article 5 and I've worked with a number of constitutional experts. That is frankly impossible. You're not calling a convention to rewrite the Constitution. It's only to propose amendments. And then 38 states have to ratify. I can name more than 13 states real quick if anyone messes with the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or any of the rights of individuals or states. If states call a convention around 3 defined subject matter areas, and any amendment comes out of the convention that's not in those subject areas, it will be immediately thrown out at the convention or by the courts after. And I've heard some folks say, why bother with an amendment that forces a balanced budget and limited taxes? They don't follow the Constitution now. They do follow this 2,700-page annotated Constitution that gives Congress the power to do anything it wants, including make you buy a health care plan that you don't want, which the courts have gone back. And so if you think that there is any risk in states calling a convention to propose amendments, think about this. We have a runaway Congress, runaway spending. We have runaway bureaucrats who are making more laws than Congress. We have runaway judges in courts that any day can fundamentally change our whole lives with the decisions they make. And every year they are chipping away at our rights, our religious freedom, our freedom of speech, from hate speech all the way up to politically correctness and to safe spaces on campus. They keep edging in on our freedom. And you're worried about a runaway convention that state legislators put together and that 38 states have to ratify? Every time Congress meets, it is a constitutional convention. Any day they meet, they can propose amendments. And folks, I've been there. I've been in the House and the Senate, and I'm much more afraid of what Congress might do than I am 38 states. I'm much more afraid about what the Supreme Court might do, even with our new judge. But I believe that our founders would be stunned that states had not done more to restrain the federal government if they saw where we are today. $20 trillion in debt, but folks, it's much, much worse than that. They have spent the money in our Social Security Trust Fund, which is not counted as debt. The Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars that are out there now chasing goods, which are going to eventually end up with inflation. Now, we have seen all the trust funds basically raided, and there is no plan or even any serious discussion about ever balancing our budget. Now, all of you in business or have a checkbook know what happens if you keep spending more than you bring it in. So I don't know when it would happen, but it is no longer a question of if we're going to bankrupt the country. There's only 2 ways they're going to stop spending. This is, I can tell you with certainty. It's either if we have an economic collapse in this country, or the states call a convention to propose amendments to restrain the federal government and to get it back within the constitutional boundaries. So that's what I'll be working on. Hopefully we'll do that. I'm going to keep working on 2 fronts, and I hope you'll work on every front too, because we can't just do one thing. I mean, I've tried helping people get elected, I've tried being elected, I've tried electing other people, but we have to try to do it all. I'm going to keep working in Washington to support conservatives once they're there, and to support those organizations and those grassroots folks who keep electing people like Jeff Duncan and Trey Gowdy. But I'm also going to be working all over the country to encourage legislatures like we have here in South Carolina to call for an amendment, call for a convention to propose amendments to restrain the federal government. This is going to take a while. Best case is probably 4 or 5 years. So we can't just forget about Congress. We've got to keep supporting them. But even that process of going through this will educate the American people about the dire fiscal situation of our country, of the intrusion of our lives and our rights by the federal government. And you don't have to explain much. The approval rating of Congress is somewhere between 10 and 0 right now, I think. And so people are ready for a change, and we can help do that. But if you can, I know that I've seen around the country, sometimes county parties will vote to support this. I know sometimes the folks who say that we're going to have a runaway convention try to get the state convention to vote against it to scare everybody away. But I'll just leave you with one thought. Folks, if you don't think an Article 5 convention is what we need right now, what is your plan to stop the out of control? Because I've tried and I'm going to keep trying, but I can tell you, we're not going to stop the federal government from bankrupting the country. We can slow it down, we can keep fighting, and we're going to do that. But folks, it's the only constitutional way that our founders gave us to slow things down. So, okay. Well, folks, thank you so much. Thanks for all you've done with me. And I don't know, are we taking questions or?
Well, we have time for a couple questions. Chairman's rules, if the chairman does not believe the question is said in a good manner, we're going to go to the next question. So please.
Yeah, just a couple of softballs and let me go.
So go ahead.
Is that a softball you think? All right, a softball. Yes, sir.
I lied, it's not a softball. Scott Black, Executive Committeeman, Canebrake Precinct. Thank you for your comments, Senator DeMint. It's a pleasure to see you again. You mentioned that Congress is currently following an annotated Constitution, basically 2,700 pages of interpretations of the Constitution. So my point, and then followed by a question is, if the annotations are unconstitutional, then it seems to me that Congress is acting unconstitutionally by following these annotations. It appears to me the Constitution is very clear in the way our founders worded it. To cloud it with false interpretation is a way to water it down. That's what Congress has done. And the question is, why didn't you mention Article 6, nullification of states refusing to follow anything Congress passes that they feel is unconstitutional? When we have that in Article 6 in our Constitution, why do we need to call an Article 5 convention?
Well, there's several questions there. I think I'm going to leave Article 6 to someone else. And some states are doing that now on sanctuary cities, drug use, other things like that. But unfortunately, Congress basically follows the rulings of the Supreme Court, which have basically changed the interpretation of the 10th Amendment, of the Commerce Clause, to mean just about anything they want it to mean. So Congress can technically say they're following the jurisprudence, the determinations of the court, but you and I know that the courts have basically misinterpreted the clear intent of the Constitution. It's been activist judges, but we can rein that in with clarifying amendments, which one of the people we're working with said if all we did is have an amendment to the Constitution that said we were serious the first time, that's all we would really need. We're not really trying to change any original intent of the Constitution, but to restore its intent and to do it in a clear enough fashion that Congress has to follow it and courts cannot reinterpret it. And that's what we're trying. So don't let anyone tell you that we're trying to change our Constitution. We want the Constitution to mean what it says. And that is limiting the jurisdiction of the federal government. I mean, we talk about enumerated powers in the Constitution, but there's no such thing anymore. And we need to make it clear enough that even Congress and the courts can understand it. So that's the whole goal with what we're doing. And in the meantime, I think you'll see more states pushing back, just as they've sued the federal government over amnesty, over Obamacare. We've seen unprecedented pushback by the states against the federal government. So I'm proud of what the states are doing, and all over the country, they're doing more on things like education choice. They're doing things on designing their own healthcare systems. They're taking back a lot of the authority in areas, and that's a lot of the things we're doing with Palmetto Promise, is trying to get our state to do what they can despite what the federal government's doing. And there's still a lot of room for us to operate here. So maybe one more softball. You think, is this real a softball?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, I've been noticing how our country is being taken over by the Sharia law thing. I mean, look at Minnesota, look at Dearborn, Michigan. Can we, as a state, stop this, ban it from being practiced in any court system? Can we do something about it now before we're like Minneapolis or we're like Dearborn? It's closing in. It seems like there's so many things going on with that now that Americans are not safe if you have Sharia law.
We should have the laws in place now that all laws apply to everyone, and to create special legal systems for different groups is something America doesn't do. I don't know if the best legal route to get there. I don't know if Article 5 is one way to do that, but I imagine states have a whole lot more latitude to actually create one legal system for everyone. But I'm not a lawyer or constitutional expert in that area, so I'll let that go. But it is disturbing to see that happen. But folks, I'm going to let everybody go home, and I'll hang around to take a few questions. But I can't thank you enough for what all of you've done over the years for our country, for the Republican Party, for conservative values, and I'm personally very grateful for all that you've done. Thank you.